All right. Great morning, my friends. Great morning, world. We are going to see if this is working. See if we are going live on all of the platforms that we are supposed to be going live on. Let's see. All right. I think we are. So we're attempting something new for this first time. We're streaming from a different platform, an RTMP connection, to see if we can get on Substack this way. So I don't know how we'll actually know if we are. Oh, yes, we are. Cool. All right. We are on Substack, and whatever that means. We're okay, cool. So we're in landscape mode and we're on Substack and it's working. Very, very cool. All right. So great morning, everybody. Great morning, world. We're here to make sense of leadership this morning, which is a very exciting topic for me. And, once again, carries a paradox that is very fascinating. One of the things that I think is of high value for a human being to do in the morning is take a certain group of steps to reclaim control of the day by not just allowing your programmed mind, your conditioned mind to boot up and, dictate your day based on yesterday, right? Because our brains are very much like computers. And when we wake up, when we go from offline to online, which is the premise of my my whole morning routine. If anybody ever wants my morning routine, just ask for it. I'll be happy to send it to you as a document. But the whole premise of it is taking command of that first gentle moment in the morning. And it starts off with gratitude, but the premise of it is to put yesterday's program that looks to boot up and start dictating and calling the shots of your day, to put that on pause. That's the goal. You want to put that program that's going to boot up on pause. And once you're in that space, you're in command. You're in command of the day. So the purpose of these lives that I do on Substack on Mondays is to just invite you. You would have to permit yourself, but just to invite you into a discussion about some of the things that make us go, And what's interesting about that moment where you move into some sort of curious contemplation of something that makes you go, like my hat. What happens in that moment is you start using your prefrontal cortex. That's what's interesting about writing, by the way, for all of you on Substack is, and I see some people joining us. I see Eric and Thomas and AM, Vire, Terminal Curiosity. I love these Substack names. Do me a favor if one of you could just chime in and say hi or something like that. I want to see if it shows up on the screen of my platform here. So if somebody could just, that's with us live right now, could just say hi. I want to see if that shows up here. So back to what I was saying and the premise of what we're talking about right now. Thank you very much. You said hi. Okay, so that only shows up on Substack. It doesn't show up on the platform, which is fine because this is streaming to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. I'll go check out your Substack. So once again, back to the premise is if we are using our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that we access when we're contemplating, when we're thinking, looking, tilt up, thinking, what happens is that you are putting your programmed, conditioned subconscious mind on pause because you're using that prefrontal cortex. So that's the value of having a conversation today about an alternative perspective and vantage point upon which we can look at leadership. And one of the greatest, ways to do that is to kind of entertain the great Napoleon Hill in his several times over written book, Think and Grow Rich. So we're going to pull from some of that today. So once again, good to see everybody. We're going to start running our Writer's Way interviews. We have a new one coming up this Thursday and then one pretty much once a week. And, that's a new series where we're going to be interviewing writers. Writers are so fascinating. Um, well, most of them, but we're going to start interviewing writers in this format. So now that we know that it's going to stream and people can see it, it's going to enable us to do all kinds of cool things. We could put pictures of their books up and use OBS and things like that, and get better vantage points of the interview. But it's just fascinating to meet a writer, and this is what I want to know from all writers, to find out what they write about, but more importantly, why. How did you come to become one of these people that wants to take your thoughts and creative ideas and put them down and pass them on, pay them forward to other people and see if they like them? It's a little bit of a crazy move, right? So we learn those stories, but then also this new landscape that is changing so fast. And we're going to address that a little bit in this talk, where writers are now doing digital online writing. And this is the new fascinating wave that we see out there. There's social media platforms for writers right now. And I just love that. Love that. So great morning, everybody. Great morning to those of you showing up. And I see that my mother is here from the islands. Great morning to you, Mom. So let's make sense of leadership. So the preface of this, and this is going to turn into a podcast as well. So we're recording this in the podcast studio. The premise of this was just a kind of an interesting paradox that I recognize that's going on with leadership right now. And what I find interesting is that I think that society might be a little bit confused, especially the young, the new generation. I think what's happening is that society is seeing what appears to be leadership, but it's really not leadership. It's just this new creature called the influencer, right? So we've always known what influence means. One of my favorite books ever is Robert Cialdini's Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. So we know what influence means, but we never really understood what an influencer is, to the point where there's people that have the ability to just have like this enormous following with content that really has no context and purpose and meaning other than providing distraction for people, which is a commodity right now, people's attention. But attract millions and millions of followers, right? So we've always known that leaders have followers, but does that make somebody a leader because they have a follower? And I'm also fascinated with Substack or LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram, any of that stuff, where there's this hunger and drive, and it's identity driven to have a following, right? But does that make you a leader? So in the old days, leaders would have followers, but nowadays things have changed. So that's the premise of this. And I see Eric said, it started because I couldn't seem to find the book I wanted to read, so I wrote it. There you go. I love that. If you don't see what you want, create it. I like that about you, Eric. Now I'm really going to go look. I see Bear Sage is here. So great morning, everybody. Feel free to share this out. This will live on Substack. So making sense of leadership, but we're going to do this the Think and Grow Rich way. And my subtitle to this piece is called Unmasking the Myths of Leadership in This Day and Rediscovering Principles That Work. So I love the idea of remembering and rediscovering. There's nothing new out there, but there's a lot forgotten. Isn't that an interesting thing to note right now? As we're moving forward so fast and cutting corners and becoming more efficient and learning faster and all of this stuff, the chances of us forgetting some just basic principles is increasing as we go. So I'm a big fan of not really claiming that I teach anything new or point out anything new. I like to remind people of things. So just think about that. What do you need to remember today? Yes, great morning, Bear Sage. So let's look at this. So in today's algorithm-driven world, we're surrounded by confusion, and that's between influencers and actual leaders. And that's kind of the paradox there. I say don't hate the player, hate the game. That's important, right? We don't want to just like, I don't want to be one of these old fogies that just complains about everything. Hate the player. I mean, hate, don't hate the player, hate the game. So I don't believe that somebody that you see out there that's like showing a cartoon picture of a cat that's making millions of dollars because the world just loves distracting themselves with it. Um, I don't think that they intended to take on the responsibility that's associated with leadership, right? I think that when people go out there and they're looking for attention, likes, views, followers, just like myself, I think when we're in that mode, I think that's more connected towards building power, your identities, your self worth, and then wealth as well, in addition to that, which there's nothing wrong with that. We're not here saying that anybody's doing anything right or wrong. We're just identifying how leadership has kind of gotten lost a little bit. That's all I'm pointing out. Remember, there's no opinions on this in this Makes Sense with Dr. JC podcast or this new stuff that I'm doing and I'm writing on Substack. It's not about sharing opinions. It's just about saying, hey, take a look at this. What do you think about that? That's kind of what we're doing here. So Napoleon Hill, just amazing. I listen and read a lot of stuff from this guy. Nearly a century ago, that's what's crazy. Nearly a century ago, pointed to a truth that we've forgotten. Authentic leadership is not about ego, power, or control, which it could appear to be that way. It's about humility. What a powerful thing to have humility. It's about imagination and the willingness to lift others higher than yourself. This is something lost in leadership right now as well. I see a lot of leaders gaining power and then gaining power and gaining power, but not paying that power forward to somebody else, to the point where that somebody else could even do a better job than them. But that's true leadership, according to this. So in this piece that I'm going to share with you in this discussion, I just want to strip away the illusions of modern leadership, modern day leadership. And I don't even know what that conversation would be like with a kid, my 15-year-old, what it means to be a leader. She's a little bit unique, but we're going to revisit Napoleon Hill's timeless traits and then challenge you at the end to rethink what it means to lead in a world that is desperate for it. We have a world that is desperately in need of a leader. I think that a lot of the things that we're hoping happen in the future require leadership. So first, I want to remind everybody, it's not your fault. I don't like to complain about things, right? And blame and shame and things like that. It's not our fault, because if you really step back and look at things, we live in an overstimulated culture that tells us leadership is about visibility. That's what the culture is teaching us right now. The more visible you are, the more that indicates that you are a leader. So whoever gets the most clicks, commands, and loudest audience, or holds the fanciest title, is crowned as the leader right now. Now, we don't use the word leader the same right now. We kind of use influencer, but I just wonder what that means. Does that mean, is that correlated to leader? Because they are leading people somewhere. News channels are leading us somewhere if we're watching it. What is your take on the news? Does everybody here listen to the news? Do you watch the news? And how much time do you spend on it? Because another version of the news is not like ABC, CBS. It's just the highlight reel of social media. You'll not only get the news, but you're going to get it tailor-made, AI-driven, with an agenda. But when we look at this closely, you start to notice how hollow and shallow that image of leadership has become. So the people that, we follow out of fear or hype, they rarely last. But I wonder if that's even part of their goal. Like, do they care about lasting? it's interesting. Say, oh, that's not going to last. Well, I don't think that's what the intention is. If I think we live in a society where people would be fine having a short flash in the pan run that makes them millions of dollars and then they just sit on it. So there's another thing that I see in generations that are coming up is, if you're from the old generation, you have this tendency of saying, oh, but that won't last. And I say, well, then they say, who cares? I'm not looking for it to last. I'm looking to acquire, right? And then invest and then just sit on it. So that's another interesting thing, good or bad, that would be left up to you. I haven't made up my mind. So what's most fascinating about society today is that these people have found a way to earn really nice incomes doing, in essence, nothing. My daughter showed me a video last night of this guy, and it's funny because he's kind of satirical and he just sits there in his kitchen and he just cooks things and makes a mess. And he's just got millions and millions and millions of followers, and he's making tons and tons of money from the platforms because he keeps people's attention on the platforms. But in essence, this guy does nothing. He does nothing. He's just caught the attention of a society looking for distraction. So doing nothing has become a business. But is that leadership? So this discussion is not about popularity and converting views into income streams, from the comfort of our couch. That's not what we're talking about, because that is doable right now. Anybody here could figure out how to do that. I mean, you got to give them credit that they figured it out. This discussion is more about, leading people to higher ground, which I think is a lost thing in our world here, rather than leading them into the deep, confusing hole of distraction and eventually procrastination. So Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich in 1937. So that's why we say almost a decade ago. And his book is more relevant now than ever, I find. He wrote that book before the first tweet, the first TikTok or the first podcast, or the first microphone was even invented. Isn't that amazing? But these words, represent the very heart, of what our confusion is around today. So if you read his words right now, I would be very curious to see what he would think about what's going on today. So he drew a sharp distinction between two kinds of leadership. So there's two kinds of leaders. You can ask yourself which one you are. And remember, you don't have to be like the president of the United States or a CEO of a company. You could be the leader of your own life, right? Or the leader of, in your community or anything like that. I think we all have the opportunity to lead, but here are the two types of leaders. So the kind of leader that is granted leadership by willing people with consent, right? Followers that consent to say, yes, that is a leader I'm going to follow. But then there's the kind that are forcing people to lead either with authority or deception and manipulation. So just stop there for a second and just ask yourself, this is fascinating to me. Ask yourself, it could even be a Substack, a writer, like I see a lot of controversial stuff out there. If there's a lot of people out there giving a lot of their attention to stuff that has nothing to do with what they're looking to accomplish in life, right? So is that a form of deception and manipulation if you're putting out content, whether it's through social media, writing, videos, or whatever, or news that is preying on a weakness? And that weakness is people are looking for distraction and people are emotionally evoked by some of this information. So I don't know if that's true leadership, right? But that is the kind that is using authority, fear, and deception, And with the advent of AI, that's getting a little bit scary because we don't even know what's real most of the time. And imagine what it's going to be like in 10 years. So this is fascinating. So only one of those types survives the test of time. But remember, we're not sure if that matters anymore. You can intimidate and manipulate people into following you, but the moment that you step away, so do they. They're not attached to you. They're attached to what you're doing. So there's a distinction, right? If you're a leader, a true leader, and you're looking to raise people up, if you step away, they will miss you. But if you're just using tactics that are grabbing people's, you know, attention, manipulating and using scare tactics and authority, as soon as you step away, they'll go find somebody else. Now, consent, on the other hand, a full buy-in and based on trust and things like that. Um, these are things that are based, like I said, on trust and respect. So that's born from the quiet recognition that you care more about the people that you serve than yourself. This is something that I see. Well, first of all, armed with this, you could very easily manipulate the audience, right? You could easily manipulate the audience to believing that you care more about them. I mean, there's very easy tactics. There's books written on that, but authenticity and altruism, is palpable. Right? We can figure that out. But this is something that we need to recognize. So Hill also reminds us that there's something that we tend to overlook with leadership. Leadership is a choice. You're not just born a leader. You have to actually accept the role. And this is why a lot of people don't, right? Because it's not always an easy task, right? With greatness and higher pay and more credit and acknowledgement comes some of the suck, So you must decide whether or not you want to be the one who follows or the one who leads, because the rewards are never the same for the two. This is interesting. It might seem easier to be a follower, but you're not going to cash in the likes of a leader. I wrote something about that. So the follower, and this is from Napoleon Hill, the follower cannot assume that they are entitled to receive the same income, as an example, as the one that has taken the responsibility to lead. That's what it's about. It's about leadership, right? It's about taking responsibility. Great morning to you, Rob and Joe. Thanks for joining us on Substack. So a leader cannot simply be the loudest person or the most shocking person in the room. A leader must also demonstrate courage when the path is uncertain. Now, that's an interesting part of accepting the role and responsibility of a leader. Is it's inconvenient, right? But a true leader is somebody that is going to go no matter what. So I want you to self-reflect on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. We've got a lot of people here from the Substack platform. So think about the respect that you're gaining and the trust that you're gaining as a result from your posts, right? Are they consistent? You'll notice that I'm doing this live every Monday. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And sometimes it's very inconvenient. Your consistency, what it is that you're doing to offer your paid subscribers and all of that stuff. Is it flash in the pan and only going to happen if things go your way? Or are you going to show that you're going to do it anyway? Because if you do, your results are predictable. Your success and results are predictable. So a leader can't be just the loudest person, right? They have to show up when things are uncertain and inconvenient. A leader must practice self-control when everything inside them wants to just react. Now, we have this stress response system, and I teach this in our Make Sense Academy, in our private group setting coaching and academy. The difference between responding and reacting. When everything in your stress response system wants to allow that knee-jerk reaction to react, you'll choose a healthy response instead. That's what a leader does. A leader must stand firm in their decisions and their plans, even when others hesitate. So just think about the writer that just puts just delicious stuff out there, and it's just taking a long time for people to see it. Maybe you get your first subscriber and it's like a family member or a friend or something, right? And you notice that your following is either hesitating, or maybe you do have a following and they're dropping off or something like that. A leader goes forward anyway. A leader must create and deliver more than what is expected. Isn't that true? Over under promise, over deliver, and not out of obligation, but out of the joy of serving. This is a great way to assess your brand. If people are watching you from afar and you don't know if they are, my podcast, by the way, my podcast last night just went over the 1 million download mark, which is crazy for me to think. And this happened in under a year. But I don't know who those people are, right? I don't meet those people unless they reach out to me and say, hey, I love that episode and things like that. So I don't know. I don't have any way of gauging, what they're doing, but I know that if they can watch me grow and go, they know that I do this because I love doing it. I'm here today and I'm so honored and privileged that people are here joining me, but I'm here today because I love taking this information and sharing it. The idea of somebody latching on to even just one thing that I say and having it make their day, for me to be their day maker, just the possibility and potential of that just brings me joy. And I hope that shines through. And the only way that I would say to test me is stop showing up and see that I do it anyway. So think about that concept that we're talking about in the context of modern workplace today, politics, or social media. How many leaders do we see who crumble under stress, who are flashes in the pan, right? Who only go if things are working out. We used to say when I was a kid, if you don't succeed, try and try again. Now we say, if you don't succeed, try something else. There's so many different things that we can do. And there's people that imitate rather than imagine, and those that cling to titles instead of responsibility. Are you more interested in a title or the responsibility? Responsibility is not fun. Some people are looking for a promotion in life because they want more responsibility, but the responsibility is not the fun part. The fun part is the credit that you get for it. So it takes a very unique person to actually get hungry for that. So Hill catalogs the causes of leadership failure really, really well. So take an assessment of yourself. These are the stumbling blocks, by the way, and what you want to watch for in the arena of play every day. So one of them is the inability to organize. Leaders have to be able to organize, or the unwillingness to perform humble services. Are you the kind of person that only wants to do the glorified stuff, the stuff that the leader does? Or are you the kind of person that will put the rubber gloves on and clean the toilet? Or, you know what I'm saying? One of the ways that shows up in my house, like I like to mow the lawn, rather than hire somebody to mow the lawn. I actually like that. But in my place of work, I do the things that I don't have to do. And I think people probably notice that. There's a lot of things in my podcast, in my business and stuff. I could have other people do it, but I still show, and I have other people do it, but I still show that. So which kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person that will do the humble services? So then there's the obsession with authority and demanding respect instead of earning it. Oh man, I can sense that a mile away. Somebody that is demanding but not earning respect and trust. One of the least attractive, and I've been like this in my life, if I'm being honest, one of the least attractive traits in a human is entitlement. So I don't know what your feelings are on that. Or the fixation of titles. These are the things that weaken our leadership ability, or the fixation of titles that hides the lack of substance beneath. So these flaws are not new, right? They've been around forever, but they're very, very much apparent right now. But the algorithm and the hype and the fast-paced world and overstimulated fast-paced world that we live in right now is allowing people to get away with things more. So that's what's interesting. I noticed that there's a lot of apathy. People don't care as much about things that we cared about as kids. The kids today don't care as much about them. One of them is this thing like, oh, that's not going to last. That's not a long-term strategy. And they said, that wasn't my goal, right? And here you are saying, how could that not be your goal? Well, goals change. Goals change. So these people that are unsuccessful, they're simply louder now, right? They're amplified by the algorithms and reward attention over authenticity. Authenticity, it's interesting to just evaluate. I mean, with the advent, it's very fascinating right now to see the advent of people using Chat GPT to help them, or completely just copy and paste with writing. Um, so the observation is that it's decreasing authenticity. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but when I read something, all I care about is whether or not it moves me, and it and it moves me in a direction to a higher ground, right? Something that said, "Oh, that's a great idea." I don't care who wrote it, to be honest with you. I never think about that. I don't care who wrote it or how it was written. That's not what it interests me. I just am interested in the content. So I don't really ever find myself evaluating whether or not somebody wrote something or had AI do it. But there's me letting go of something that is really important to the people of yesterday and also a lot of people today. People like to say, if it's not human intelligence, I'm not interested in it. So I can see that I'm changing as well. So here's the paradox. Leadership is not about securing your place at the top. It's about the intention, not the attention. It's about the intention of handing the keys of the car that you're driving over to somebody else. It's about it's about raising others up so well that they can actually take command and surpass you. This is the kind of leadership. When I'm mentoring somebody, whether they're clients of mine or coaches that I coach, or even writers that reach out to me and they're looking to build Substack, um, I'm not trying to get them to think that I'm of value, although I do like that feeling. What I'm doing is I'm trying to hand them the keys so that they actually raise up and do it better than me. And I get a lot of joy out of that. I mean, I would love to play a part in anybody watching right now to grow their Substack to the biggest and best, most successful Substack ever. I don't need them to point me to me like in a basketball game when I give you a good assist, but that's something that would bring me great joy. So a truly great writer, for instance, is somebody that inspires others to share their creative ideas and perspectives and write. So this idea of the writer's way, which is definitely getting me attention because we're using collaboration, but what I'm really interested in, like we've got this guy coming on Thursday this week. His name's Neil Bishop, and he'll probably see this. Just a fantastic writer, and he's just a really reliable, great guy. I think everybody in the world should read his stuff. So I'm going to have him on the show so more people find out about him. And if I find out that Neil becomes like the greatest thing since sliced bread, oh man, that would bring me great joy. And if I grow along with him, fantastic. That's called a win-win. So this is where Hill's wisdom meets the present moment. In a world obsessed with personal gain, true wealth comes to those who devote themselves to the growth of others. Are you devoted to the growth of others or yourself? It's totally fine if you're devoted to your own growth, but is that primary or secondary to the growth of others? At the last 10 minutes of your life, if you're allowed to contemplate and see what matters at that moment, right? What do you think is going to matter? You're going to just wonder if you actually made an imprint and what you're leaving behind. You don't take anything with you. So this is not a sentimental philosophy. It is a practical strategy for life, business, and legacy. And ironically, when you help others get what they want, you get more of what you want. So agenda and intention come into play there. So when you focus on service, trust is built. And when trust is built, cooperation follows. This is a big thing with Napoleon Hill, cooperation. Cooperation is the most powerful currency a leader can hold. What cooperation is when you ask a group of people to do things, when you say jump, how many people say how high in your life? That's a following. You don't need, there's a great document. If you want, I'll send it to you. Just ask for it. It's called 1,000 True Followers. what it says is you don't need millions of followers. If you have 1,000 true followers that are all in cooperation with your mission, right? You'll have everything that you've ever wanted. So make a list. This is a challenge to you. Make a list of the names of the people in your life with whom you have obtained cooperation. How many people in your life do you have cooperation from? And these are people that you could ask for favors, and those who will support you those who will support you when you step away from the herd and blaze your own path. When you do something abnormal or uncommon, which ironically is the same thing as extraordinary, who is going to follow you? Like Jerry Maguire when he quit his job. So I've learned that leadership begins not with others, but within. I love that. If I cannot step back from ego and choose clarity over pride, then my leadership is nothing more than a reaction dressed up as authority. Let me read that again. I love this. If I cannot step back from ego and choose clarity over pride, well, then my leadership is nothing more than a reaction dressed up as authority, wearing a costume called authority. So my 4-step interface response system was made so that I could teach and live, this process, because at its core is a framework for leadership in your own life. So it's that conscious choice. I teach people in this system, there's this place where you make a conscious choice to see differently. That's what my system is all about. Is you have to voluntarily, consciously decide to change the way you look at things so that the things that you look at will change. But it starts with that conscious choice to see differently and to hold space for others, to respond instead of react. And remember, leaders who practice this, they not only elevate themselves, but also awaken the potential in everyone around them. That's leadership. So today is about stripping away the myths. Leadership is about humility. It's about altruism. It's about offering the keys to those who walk behind you so that they can drive further than you ever could imagine. So ask yourself this. If you walked away tomorrow, if you just walked away tomorrow, would your influence fade, or would it ripple and cascade forward through the leaders that you have raised up? Because if not, if you realize that it'll fade, then maybe that's the work that you need to do, is to start raising other people up, mentoring other people. I think most people spend their lives following and expecting to get the abundance that is coming to those that take the responsibility of leadership. So that is the proper metric and legacy of leadership. How many people you have raised up. So Napoleon Hill warned that leadership rooted in ego collapses, but leadership grounded in humility endures. So do you think that we've lost sight of that truth in today's world? I mean, from where I sit, yes. But from where my daughter sits, I don't think she cares, right? Because she doesn't know. She knows of us, but like we're like history now. So who in your life models authentic leadership? I'd love to see people say that in the comments. Models authentic leadership, the kind worth following long after the spotlight fades. So that's it for today. Love and appreciate you all. I hope that you'll follow along, subscribe to my Substack. I'm really putting out some great stuff. We've got a new paid platform in Substack now where the people are getting actually a private vlog video every day just to help them to take command of their day. $8 a month for tons and tons of stuff, tons of content. I guess we call that our premium service. Our podcast is just exploding. It's international. We hope that you'll follow it. It's absolutely free, as well as my Substack. And that is Make Sense with Dr. JC Podcast. You'll notice the glasses, the yellow background. And remember, if you learned something today, give it away, because that's how it's going to stay. So we'll see you next time, and have a nice day. Bye-bye now.